Okay, so I'm delighted to introduce now our next speaker, Clyde Fowle, who is leading a question and answer session on the topic of weaving sustainability into the primary curriculum. Clyde is a freelance ELT writer and teacher trainer. He recently ran an intensive English program at the IB International School in Thailand, where he developed sustainability through English courses for 9 to 14-year-old learners and arranged English outside the classroom activities, including sessions at the school's organic farm. During this highly interactive session, Clyde gives the signal. We encourage you to type your questions on the topic directly in the chat box, and Clyde will do his very best to answer them. Take it away, Clyde.
Thank you very much, Letitia, and thank you everyone for joining this session. Yeah, can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. So, yeah, this is a Q&A session, so I really want to field questions from you guys. But first of all, I'll just give you a little bit of background on some of the things I've done with my students regarding sustainability, because I just think it's such an important thing these days to introduce students to green issues. You can see the opening slide here. There's a picture of some of my students on a farm at our school, and you know, these students, many of them came to our school from living in cities and towns. They didn't like mud or soil, but after a while they loved being on the farm and getting dirty and connecting with nature. So yeah, what I really want to look at today is how we can help our students get a voice in terms of English, but also in terms of expressing their opinions about environmental issues and sustainability. And I thought it would be useful to start with a little story about a boy at my school who came to our program. He's about 10 years old, and he was pretty shy and timid Thai boy, but his English was developing well, and he was doing English classes and other classes, including our sustainability classes. And we went on a field trip to the local botanical gardens in Chiang Mai, and we had lunch, and after lunch he came up to me and said, "Ajahn Clyde, why is it when you teach sustainability to us and you tell us not to use too much plastic and to say no to plastic bags, that we have all our packed lunches packed in plastic, not just one bag, but every item, apples chopped up in bags, rice in a bag, plastic bag, 2 or 3 cookies in a bag. Every kid had about 5 plastic bags." And he was really upset by this. So I said to him, "Can I video you saying this? And I'm going to send this to our headmaster." And I sent that video to the headmaster of the school, showing all the plastic waste from our 30 students on this field trip, and this boy's video complaining about our school canteen. And that created a change in school policy, and the school no longer packages lunches in that way. So this is a really good example of how one boy made change in our school to help the environment. He made the connections between what he's learning in the classroom and what he saw, and he spoke up. And it really also gave him a lot of confidence, boosted his confidence in English and in himself, that the headmaster of the school could make a change based on just what he said. So that came from him, but it also came from what we'd been doing in class. We'd been learning about all different sustainable issues, and one of them was saying no to plastic bags. And if you were listening to Carol's plenary earlier, she talked about bringing the children's own language into the classroom. And this isn't, I was teaching in an international school with multilingual classes, and the kids were boarding students, and mostly they weren't Thai, and they'd just come to Thailand. So we taught them how to say, they didn't say no to plastic bags in shops in Thailand. But we also got all the other kids in the class, Thai, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, French, all to teach in their own language to the rest of the class how to say no to plastic bags. So that was a very inclusive way to approach it, and it had an impact. So that's just one example of something that happened in my classrooms. I've got a few examples on slides here of some things that I do, but I'd really like some of your questions. So if what I've just said has sparked anything in your mind about how we can do this and what we have to do, please type your questions, because that's what I really want to spend my time answering. So one of the things I mainly did with sustainability is mini kind of project-based learning with sustainability. So in the first term with my students, I introduced them to basic concepts of sustainability and green issues and environmental issues. So recycling, saying no to plastic bags, that kind of thing. And then to review this, they made mini My Little Sustainability books. So that was a good activity that they did. Also, we learned about the Green School in Bali, and our school in Chiang Mai claimed to be a green school, but I got my students to do a school evaluation, how green is our school, and they walked around the school looking for things that were good and bad in terms of environmental impacts, and took photos and came back and shared their ideas about our school and how the school could improve. Also, like many projects and many things in primary classrooms, like special days come up through the calendar and we can incorporate them into our learning. So we do Earth Day celebrations at the beginning of the year, like in January at the new term. I got my students to set green goals for their forthcoming year. For Halloween, we grew pumpkins and did a project on pumpkins, how they grow, and then kids grew their own pumpkin seeds. I've done that a few times. And we also did some seed saving activities. Okay, so now I'm looking at some of your questions. How can you get parents involved? Well, I think the easiest way really to get parents involved is the students get their parents involved. So in a previous, when I taught students at the British Council, for example, we didn't have an organic farm like at the school I taught at more recently. But we did a similar pumpkin project for Halloween. But I gave I got a packet of pumpkin seeds and I gave each student 2 seeds to take home and plant. And we, in class, we potted some up in class that we kept in class. But I gave students seeds to take home. And many of them did that, and with their parents, and their parents came back and the kids came back telling me, and each Saturday or Sunday when they came to class, the first thing they wanted to do was to look at our pumpkins, the ones that we were growing in class, and to tell me about their pumpkins at home. So that got parents involved through the children. Then what other questions are coming up? Okay. Okay, Karen's asking about how do you deal with real beginners in English. My students are real beginners. but they were in a kind of intensive immersion program. But how I started to on the first day, none of my students know what sustainability means. You know, it's a difficult, long word for them. So I started with, I made simple word searches for my students that included basic words related to green issues and sustainability. So starting off with the vocabulary they need to know. Some of them, obviously, they're young, but depending where they come from, they might have some understanding of recycling things or air pollution. Many of my students were Chinese and they knew about air pollution. So they can link to their lives the things you do in class, but just keeping it simple. Okay. Okay. Do you have any ideas on making lessons more sustainable, for example, using fewer photocopies? Yeah, I think when you teach, children are very good at keeping their eye on you too. So you teach them about recycling, reusing and reducing, and you really have to live up to what you say. So, you know, in those sustainability classes, I just did a lot of eliciting ideas from them, writing things up on the board, watching videos, going outside and doing things. We didn't have a book, we didn't use lots of photocopies and things, kept that to a minimum. But obviously we sometimes we had to make copies sometimes, but you know, always, I told my students, you know, to keep an eye on me, to make sure I always used both sides of the paper and wasn't wasteful of paper, and they quite enjoy monitoring that too, once they're aware of it. So that's one of the things I did. Another question I had from someone before this session was about making sustainability something that's integrated more into what we do and not just an add-on. Because I think sometimes we do a lesson on the environment or a unit in a book on the environment, but then we move on to the next topic, the next unit, and it's disconnected and we don't continue with the sustainability theme. So I think things that I've done for that, really weaving sustainability into your general curriculum. So if many books include units on homes and the rooms in a home, furniture, but one of the projects I did with my students is designing eco-homes. So you can see on this slide one of the homes that a student combined. This was at the end of the year, so we'd learn about alternative renewable energies, and we'd learn about lots of different things to do with sustainability, and this was actually the last project I did with these students. We went on a field trip to organic farm and learning center where we learned how to make adobe bricks, where they were building adobe mud houses. So we'd done that, and then the students came back and they designed their own dream eco homes, and we had some really creative, amazing ideas coming out from the students. And of course, every young learner's book has units on food. So when we were talking about food, I introduced the concept of meat-free Mondays and explained it to my students, and we did mini projects on that. We also talked about endangered species and extinction when we're learning about extinct animals. As I said, shopping, reducing, saying no to plastic bags was something we did. Daily routines. A good project I did with my students is keeping a water diary. So with learning about daily routines, and obviously they learn about having a shower, brushing your teeth, washing, toilets, this kind of thing, which use water. So I got my students over a week between our sustainability classes to keep a diary of the water they used in a day. And I think this is quite good because we just turn on a tap, we don't really think about it. But when they monitor it, they realize how much water they're using. Some students, are having showers for 15 minutes or longer, and they really realized this is very wasteful of water. So someone's asked about which age group and level of students. So I've taught sustainability to students from 9 to 14 years old, and around beginner to elementary level, quite low level students. But it's something that they really get engaged in. And my students at the end of term is always on our feedback, is nearly always one of the classes that gets the highest student feedback. And students also afterwards did projects. When they went into the mainstream school, they chose primary students for their end of grade 5 IB personal projects. Quite a few of my students did them on issues related to the environment and sustainability. Okay, I'm just looking at the questions. How can we best focus on sustainability without students feeling the future is too bleak? I think if you make students feel that they can make a difference, that's the thing. Whether it's saying no to plastic bags, whether it's doing meat-free Mondays, they know they're making an impact on the environment, and they have control in terms of their some lifestyle choices that they can make. And I think that's giving them power to do that is really important. Yeah, my students are all non-native speakers of English that I've done this with. Like with anything, you just keep it simple and introduce the concepts in appropriate ways for their age and their language level. Someone asked about topics tend to repeat themselves throughout the curriculum. So how do we not repeat things? Well, I think we can do things in different ways. I mean, I don't think any of my students had designed an eco-home before. I think if we try to think of creative approaches to things, then students will get interested and engaged. I've never had students say, oh, I don't want to talk about this because I've already learned about recycling before. Because you can always be creative. If you're talking about recycling, reusing, you can get students to think of the rubbish that's around in their homes and how it can be reused to make useful things. They come up with really creative ideas. I've done projects on that. You could do that, with them when they were 8, do it again when they're 10. Another teacher might do it when they're 12, and I'm sure the students would come up with different ideas each time. So I think you don't want to do exactly the same thing over again with them, but a new twist is what you need, like with any topic. Okay. Any other questions? I'm just looking through that I haven't covered. Okay, so maybe David's just having a question, another question. But yeah, as I said, I think it's something that really engages students, and it's something that often isn't really covered in schools, I don't think, and I don't think in ELT classrooms it tends to be covered enough. And so I think what's important is making the links for students between all the as many of the topics as we can in our courses and our curriculums, and linking that back to environmental themes, so they realize that it's all linked together. Okay, how can children... Yeah, that's a good question. How can children focus on reducing their carbon footprint? So yeah, you know, once they learn about energy and fossil fuels and renewable fuels, they, like anyone else, they can think about cycling more, walking more. But I think for younger kids, I kept it more simple in terms of reducing the plastic they use, and not saying no to straws and things like that. Just simple things that they have control over, because maybe children don't always have control over their transport and things like that. But yeah, once they make the links, they can pressurize their parents. Any opposition? Well, the school I worked in, its mission statement included sustainability. So it was actually something that we were supposed to include in our curriculum. And so the school supported it. I didn't have any opposition from parents. And as I said, the students themselves really found this one of the most engaging classes they had in their weekly curriculum. We only had one period a week in our sustainability classes, but we also had English outside the classroom activities, which included going to our school farm. So like every other week, each group of students would go to the farm for 2 periods. Do you use any equipment, or do they just observe the surroundings? Well, in my school, can you hear me? Seems to have gone. Hello?
That's fine, Clyde. We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, my screen's frozen. Okay. Yeah, in my school we had a great green space, like a farm and a river going through our campus, lots of trees. So it was a great environment to teach in and introduce students to sustainability. But I also used lots of videos that I found on YouTube and other places to bring some of the issues into class. I showed my students the documentary Racing Extinction over a term, just a few minutes each week, 10 minutes of the documentary, and then discussion and activities. And that's quite a heavy-hitting documentary, really, for some kids. But I think it's very powerful too, and important for them to understand the impacts we're having on other species. Okay. So, yeah, my advice would be start simple. Introduce the basic concepts of related to sustainability to your students first, and then they can make the links. They start to make links themselves very quickly once they understand the importance of this issue for the world and for them. So really it kind of has a snowball effect in a way. So I think the most important thing really is making your students aware of their role in society and in terms of the environment and the impacts that they have and we have in life. And kids love nature. They love animals. They want to help and save them. So we can encourage that. And often then we try and make links to other parts of our curriculum, but often they'll come up with those links too in class. So I think it's just raising awareness of this and then being conscious as a teacher when you're planning other lessons of how these links can be made, and not necessarily every lesson talking that's a general English lesson talking about sustainability, but where, as and when it's appropriate, bringing this up and talking about it. Okay. Are there any more questions? I'm not sure if my screen is frozen because nothing.
Clyde,
I haven't seen any more.
I think your screen has frozen, Clyde, so I'm going to read the questions to you.
Okay.
So I had a question from Mike B, and Mike says, environmental issues are increasingly politicized. Can this be kept out of the classroom?
Well, I think they are, you know, in a sense there's a political side to it, but I think when you're teaching young children, you're not really talking about the politics, it's more morals really that you're introducing and helping them see good and bad, right and wrong, and it's not really a political thing, but kids as they get a bit older, maybe teenagers may become more active politically. I wouldn't really be against that anyway. If they're, you know, like school strikes and things like that, I would support it. But yeah, I think that once they realize the severity of the climate crisis, kids will want to do whatever they can to change it. And, you know, like, I had a lot of Chinese students in my classes, and they're quite outspoken about the environmental issues in China and air pollution and things. And, you know, many of them had been brought to school in Thailand because of air pollution. So it is political and it impacts their lives. But, yeah, I don't really know what to say. But really young kids, I don't think they see it as a political thing. They just see it as a moral, what's right and what's wrong, and being kind to the environment and other creatures is how they want to act. Are there any other questions that I've missed? Because my
We've got a
screen
question
is...
from Kate, Clyde, and she's asking, did you develop a database of high-frequency words? So in terms of language around and vocabulary around the topic, and were you able to develop a database of those useful vocabulary for the topic for the age range?
Okay. Well, I didn't really develop a database, but I think obviously there's key, like with any topic, there's, as an umbrella theme, there's key vocabulary that students need to understand in terms of sustainability, that, you know, green, environmentally friendly, reducing, recycling, these kind of words. But then when you get into subtopics on the theme, like we talked about energy and fossil fuels, renewable energies, so learning about wind power, solar power, there's specific key vocabulary in that area. And then, as I said before, we looked at extinction, so they learned vocabulary to do with species and extinction. We also looked at population and not necessarily about just seeing the impact of people, and this, we did a study on where they came from and populations and birth rates and the general world population increasing and the strains that's putting on the environment. So yeah, each subtopic of sustainability has its own set of vocabulary related to it, and I just kind of dealt with, like, read things and watched videos and chose what to show my students that I thought were comprehensible to them, and then focused on teaching them some of the key terminology in each area. And lots of it has, I was working in an international IB school, so lots of it has great links to science and other school subjects. So they're learning a lot of vocabulary that's useful for them in their science classes too.
Great. Thank you, Clyde. I guess we don't have any more time for questions. So thank you very much for sharing all your experience and for answering all our questions about sustainability. That's an essential topic now.
Thank you.
And I guess it provided us with great ideas and insight on how to deal with it with our learners. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, everyone, for joining the session too.
And now we're going to have a 5-minute break.